I'm a hair mineral analysis expert. I have a background in functional medicine, and I educate people using HTMA testing to maximize health, erase debilitating symptoms, and gain energy. I'm a multi-time kettlebell sport world champion, and I'm constantly searching for high-performance pros from all over the world to bring you this human optimization podcast. My name is Lisa Pitel-Killah. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. I am your host, Lisa Pitel-Killah. And today I have here with me Dr. Dwight Chapin. He holds a degree in biology from Queen's University. He's a doctor of chiropractic as well from the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College. He practices medical acupuncture and active release technology, a non-invasive treatment to locate and quickly resolve soft tissue disorders. He co-owns and operates a large multidisciplinary clinic in Mississauga, Ontario, and has led corporate wellness programs for nationally recognized corporations, including the Globe and Mail, Canada Post, and General Mills Canada Corporation. Dr. Chapin has made it his life's mission to care for, educate, and inspire others in their journey toward optimal health. In his first book, which we're going to dive into today, Take Good Care, 7 Wellness Rituals for Health, Strength, and Hope, he brings the science of preventative medicine to life. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, I'm just so happy that you are going to join us and share because, I always say sharing is the way that people gain knowledge and the way that it brings something into their life that maybe they just weren't quite looking for. And it's going to help them. So I always say there's a reason that you ended up here, right? There's always somewhere we started. There's something that kind of made us take this path in life and then obviously move on to create something amazing like you have. So tell our viewers and our listeners a little about that journey.
Sure. So I've been in practice for close to 25 years now. And in that role as a musculoskeletal expert, I've had the opportunity to put many leaders back together, working with high-performing executives and leaders in sport, entertainment, media, healthcare, education. And in my practice, I've always seen that leaders sort of tend to fall into one of two buckets, right? There are those that are chasing a deadline or chasing a pursuit and sort of burn everything in the process of that pursuit, including health and well-being, and often find themselves in trouble, and that's when they'll end up in my office. And then there are leaders that are on the front edge of prevention and just seem to develop a perspective and an awareness and a discipline to the practice of self-care, and they're able to elevate their health and performance to a really impressive level, and not just impact their own well-being and their performance, but also those around them. And so I've spent my career studying that second group. I've always been fascinated with those individuals that have that discipline to self-care. And in the early days of COVID, when everyone was fighting with the restrictions and having to push pause in their life, I found that by the end of 2020, a lot of patients were beginning to come in with a different mindset. There was this desire to want to come out of the pandemic with a different relationship with their health, with work, with family, with friends, with where they were in life. And there was this determination to lean into self-care with a little bit more discipline and intention. And it was at that point that I was like, okay, I need to start telling some of these stories of these individuals that I have developed these relationships with as a way to inspire people and bring the research of self-care to life. And that's where the journey started for me. So from that first thought of, okay, this is the time to write this book and tell these stories to publication was about a 2.5-year journey.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow. And so it hit the market in May, just this May 2023, right? So yeah, brand new on the market. And so obviously, so Toronto Argonauts are one of, they go to your clinic. I think there's lots of people that will bring into the picture with regards to people that you have mentored and have supported and helped. But so let's talk about some wellness secrets, right? Everybody wants a little insight into something. And so kind of tips from some of those stories or some of those elite athletes that people can apply to their day-to-day life. What would that be?
So I think as a starting point, like as we get into some of the rituals, and there are 7,
Mhm.
As I started to work with these individuals, my intention initially was to tell their life story and reveal their strategies for dealing with adversity, for preparing and recovering from a peak performance event, and then reveal the secrets behind their self-care practices. And I do that. Each of the 21 individuals featured in the book, they have sort of their own little section where I reveal their story.
Yeah.
But as I got into these interviews and working with these individuals, I discovered that there was this common ground. And so the youngest of the 21 is in her late 20s. She's Kamika Bingham. She's one of Canada's fastest women
Mhm.
and competes in 2 Olympics. And her strategies for self-care are the same as the CEO and publisher for the Globe and Mail, Philip Crawley, or Jim Tree Living from Dragon's Den and Boston Pizza. And those gentlemen are reaching 80. And so the common ground is the practice of these 7 wellness rituals. And so before we dive into the specifics of those, I think what's really important is that there's a distinction between habits and rituals. And the reason I
Mm.
call them rituals is because there's this intention behind the practice of these simple strategies. And when you bring that intention and you learn to stack these behaviors, this is when we gain access to the body's healing potential. So it's not an add-on. It's not like, where am I going to fit my self-care in? These
Right.
individuals lay these strategies down and they cultivate their formula with a great pride, and their formulas are constantly evolving, and so that's the part that I found really inspiring. So when I turn to someone like Michael Pinball Clemens, who's one of the mentors featured in the book,
Yeah.
I mean, Pinball brings such a passionate intention to his wellness. And I've seen him deliver many game day locker room speeches. And one of my favorites, he said to the locker room, he said, "Listen, gentlemen, in life we have the opportunity to make one of 2 choices. We have the choice of discipline, or we have the choice of regret. The choice is yours, but the choice you make will define the course of your life." And with that, he walked out of the room. And the team went on to win the Eastern Final in 2017 on our way towards the Grey Cup. So it's at a high level, you can say, sure, getting sleep, eating well, getting enough exercise, doing resistance training, working on my resiliency and my mental fitness, bringing more joy and play and strength of social relationships in my life. I mean, those things all make sense, but it's how you weave those in and the intention and the commitment that you bring to it.
Yeah.
And what these high level individuals and executives and athletes have taught me is that they approach every day and their formula for self care as a new opportunity to play. And so they're kind to themselves. Like, they're not perfect. These aren't masters of clean living. Like, their lives are messy, just like yours and mine.
Yeah.
They've just built this strategy and are constantly playing this game within the game of, how can I get a little bit better? What choices can I make today to stack in my favor so that I have a better health and or a better performance? And I think that's a really important point, just as we get started.
Yeah. And one of the points that you just mentioned that I think is really important is that we're not perfect. And
No.
I think that that is such a common, I don't want to say expectation. I feel like that's wrong, but it's almost a misconception because we feel like if we're not perfect, then we're not doing it right. And that's so wrong. So
Right. And
wrong.
when you feel like you're not doing it right, like, a lot of people fall into the default of doing nothing. Like, so it's just very
Exactly.
reactive from one day to the next. And
Ex- yeah,
like
100%.
every day I work with people whose struggles are just rooted in their daily routine. And there are some people that see it, right? They're just their lives are too demanding, too busy, and it's too overwhelming. And so it's just one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And there are others that are blind to how their lifestyle choices are impacting their health. And so if in today's conversation your listeners can take one thing away from our conversation and just build that into their routine tomorrow, like, they're that much closer, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be this catastrophic monumental shift in lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's what excites me. Like, the research is showing us that 80% of common degenerative diseases that most people attribute to aging, we have control over in how we choose to live our lives. So
Yeah.
it's not meant to be judgmental. It's just meant to be like, hey, our choices have tremendous power. Start putting that power to work by stacking choices in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about the 7 rituals
Sure.
and how we can incorporate some of those into our daily routine. How does that all work?
Sure. Sure. So the first ritual is prioritizing sleep, rest, and recovery.
Mhm.
And sleep is just absolutely essential. It affects every tissue, organ, system in our body, and roughly a third of Canadians are not getting enough sleep, and somewhere between 50 to 70% aren't getting quality sleep, meaning they're not waking feeling rested and are moving through their day with fatigue. And when we stack enough of those days back to back to back, then we start to impact not just only health and performance, but overall physiology and risk of burnout and chronic disease. So the first strategy in tapping into healing potential is beginning to understand, all right, we need adults on average 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. One of the mentors featured in the book is Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe. She's a brilliant stress resiliency expert and accomplished author. And I love her formula for sleep. She plays to a 3-day average. So Robin has a very busy practice and a busy author and writer and researcher. And so over a 3-day average, she'll look to try to land somewhere between that 7 to 9 hour window. For her, it's just around the 8 hour mark.
Yeah.
But she recognizes that when life gets busy and her kids need her in a different way, or she's pulled aside on a conference or what have you, she may not get there. And the last thing we want to do is create stress and anxiety around this need for sleep. So I like that approach. One of the things that we can do right out of the gate to get sleep cycle back on track is to use light to your advantage. So to cue our circadian rhythm, if we expose ourselves to light within the first 30 to 60 minutes upon waking, natural light is better. Then we start that clock that works backwards towards our sleep cues that'll trigger later in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we're preparing for sleep, again, using light to your advantage, dim lights an hour before you want to be asleep. And in that hour, with great purpose and intention, you're employing a pre-sleep ritual or routine that's designed to be activities that calm the body down, calm the mind down, and almost give us that off ramp from a busy day. And when we perform that ritual on a regular basis, we're training our nervous system that no, this is the time of the day that we start to wind down and sleep is coming. And that habit shifts the way in which the brain works in such a way that we enter sleep with greater ease. So playing with light, getting that pre-ritual sleep ritual down, whatever that is, yoga, a warm bath, a meditative practice, gentle yoga, reading. I mean, some type of practice that's investing in your self-care is an important step. And then, you're watching to limit the alcohol consumption late in the day. You're limiting the food that you're consuming after the dinner time. Those late meals can be very disruptive with sleep cycle. Cutting back on your caffeine after the lunch hour also plays a role. And then as another strategy, we try to get people active in their day earlier in the day because that activity helps sleep entry as well.
Yeah. And the screens, right?
Yeah.
Shut the screens down. There's always a lot of people that are on their phone until you can't do that, right?
That's
It
right.
sends a different signal to the body. So
That's
putting
right.
those screens away and giving body time to, again, read, and practice, a bedtime ritual is important for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, to access these tips and strategies from the perspective that sleep has quite a profound biological effect on the body, sort
Yeah.
of gives it purpose because it's not seen then as an inconvenience, or you're not going to bed, putting your head on the pillow and thinking of sleep like a light switch that you could just turn on or off.
Yeah.
Like we have to actually work at our ability to enter sleep. And when we do, I mean, some of the studies on how the brain just detoxifies in sleep and flushes out some of the memory impairing proteins, the beta amyloid proteins and tau proteins that are memory impairing proteins and linked to different dementia and Alzheimer conditions, that in and of itself is motivation for me to want to make sure that I'm working towards getting that 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep a night. So
Yeah.
it's bringing that awareness and intention to the discipline of the wind down, and then, as you said, limiting screen time and setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's keep going now. What would be the next one?
Yeah. So ritual number 2 is consume healthy fuel.
Mhm.
We're seeing that 2/3 of Canadians are obese and overweight, and 50 to 60%, depending on which study you read, of our calories consumed are from ultra processed foods. So Yeah. One of the mentors in the book is Jennifer Zygo, and Jen is the dietitian for the Toronto Raptors, as well as Athletics Canada and Gymnastics Canada. And what I love about Jen's approach is that, listen, she says, like, there is no one diet that works. I
Yeah.
mean, we're spending north of $70 billion a year across North America on diet and weight loss and trying to discover that diet that's going to work, when the reality is, and Jen will say, like, every person has to find their journey to fueling your body well. So your dietary choices, the resources you have available to you, your emotional state, your metabolic health, your medical history, your gut microbiome, your own
Yeah.
genetic predisposition, all of these things influence what we need from diet. And what I loved and what I learned working with these mentors was that they use food as a therapeutic tool.
Mm.
And so they are making choices in the foods they're consuming. Many of them are choosing to eat whole foods, looking to limit the inflammation in their body, and they're eating to set themselves up for success and performance the next day.
Right.
And that's the motivation to make the choices that they make. So the book doesn't prescribe a particular diet. None of the mentors featured um, would say they are deprived in their diet. They celebrate with food, they enjoy food, but they are very intentional with the choices that they make, and they lean towards an anti-inflammatory diet,
Yeah.
limiting sugar, refined carbs, and unhealthy fats and salt.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. And, I find too, again, we're going back to that perfect, right? The
Yeah.
all or nothing philosophy. And so I feel like that goes hand in hand with so many different lifestyle changes that one can
Mm-hmm.
make. And so
Mm-hmm.
making small changes and just working at them. Remember, when you wake up and open your eyes, tomorrow's a new opportunity to make different choices.
You got
Right?
it. You
Didn't
got
do
it.
it all
Yeah.
today. That's okay, right? That's
Yeah.
behind you. Now let's go look forward and see what that
Yeah.
opportunity looks like.
In the intensity of the early days in COVID, I found myself sort of falling into bad habit with respect to this, right? Like, I was
Yeah.
pushing hard, very focused on the intensity of the experience with patients and trying to figure out what we were doing as the policies and procedures and
Right.
sanitization practices were being put into place. And I was going from my breakfast, which was usually sometime around 6:30 a.m., and then not eating again until 1:30 in the afternoon, and
Wow.
wondering why I was dropping, quality of energy and my decision making ability. And so it was sort of like, how have I let that happen, right? So just introducing a strategic mid morning break that was, for me, is a handful of walnuts and blueberries, or some type of protein source, just to kind of bridge that gap, made a huge difference in my mood and energy and
Yeah.
the quality of my ability in the job that I have. So you're right. It's just sort of, where can I make healthy choices? Where can I introduce more fruits and vegetables and fiber and omega-3 and polyphenols, and bring that perspective of the food we are consuming has a huge impact on our ability to tap into the genetic predisposition to
Yeah.
heal, or it has the ability to turn us on the defensive, which puts us into this chronic inflammatory state and puts our immune system very much on this defensive mode, and shuts down the genetic predisposition to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Number three.
Number three is fight for your waistline. And this
Oh, I
ties
like
into
it.
number two.
Yep.
It's important that, in the fight's not a fight for some number on a scale or for some unattainable body image, right? The fight is the fight against our own evolutionary forces that have shaped our metabolism. So our ancestors were very much rewarded if, in times of abundance, they could stockpile calories and put on a little bit of fat, because who knows when the next period of adversity is going to hit, or the
Right.
next difficult season, right? So we're all now living in times of abundance. And when our calorie choices are such that we are consuming ultra processed foods, and many Canadians are not getting the activity level that they need, there is this constant state of abundance. And the body is incredible at taking those excess calories and that abundance and converting it to fat, which is an awesome, rich energy source. But we'll continue to lose this fight, and we'll continue to see the obesity numbers rise if we don't change our patterns. And so The fight for your waistline is very much about understanding how the body uses energy and again, how choice can impact metabolic health by changing your relationship with food and looking to alter that calorie energy equation so that you are trending in the direction you wish to. And it's not just enough to look to choices or to have a discipline around the choices that you're making to achieve a healthy waistline. Very much is linked into mental health and linked into community and social connections, as well as it is physical activity. So it's really a mix of all 7 of the rituals coming together.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's interesting as we talk about the last 3 years, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there were good and bad that came out of all of that. I think a lot of people kind of got in touch with what they might have been missing, right? Maybe we're
Mm-hmm.
working a
Mm-hmm.
little bit too much and maybe we're not getting enough social time with our friends and family and things like that. So that was a good thing. But I think and I think the Zoom part really expanded people's horizons because now we can be on Zoom. You know, you're in Mississauga and I'm in
Yeah,
Ottawa and we're in the
right.
same space talking to one another, learning, and I'm learning, right? And I'm meeting you. And so that's an amazing thing, but it's also very sedentary when you're
Yeah,
sitting on Zoom all day, right? Whereas people before would be meeting people, and I know for you, you're still meeting people in the office, obviously, but there's a lot of businesses that didn't go in that direction. And I think that comes back around to having a practice and being more aware if you are one of those people now that are kind of behind a desk more than you were before and not even
yeah,
having the steps to, you know, go to the front desk and meet a client and come back to the office. Like that movement isn't there anymore, right? And I
yeah.
think that's an important part too.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful segue into ritual 4, and that's move to stay young. And you're absolutely right. Like the average adult Canadian is spending somewhere around 9 to 9.6 hours a day behind a screen or
Oh
sitting.
my goodness. Yeah.
And so the move to stay young ritual is all about, okay, we need to recognize we need more movement in our day. So how can we bring that movement to the day, even if your job does have you behind a computer for most of the day? So
Yeah.
the first goal in this ritual is try to limit the time you spend sitting at one episode to at least 60 minutes or shorter, right? So break up the seating, the time spent sitting by introducing movement. So get up and do a mini squat or washroom break or
Yep.
stand and do a couple of knee chests or a lunge or just any type of movement that'll change the loading of the body. So limit time spent sitting to no longer than 60 minutes in one sitting. The second is to bring more movement to the week and elevate your heart rate for a total of 150 minutes with moderate paced activity
Mm.
in 10-minute increments over the course of the week. Now that's the goal, right? So coming back
Mhm.
to it doesn't need to be perfect. If you're at 0 minutes, then start with a walk around the block, right? Get used to doing that once a week, and then maybe it's twice a week, right? So it's just finding ways to creatively bring more movement to your day. And in the book, I talk about some of the important fundamental movements and the importance of practicing movement if you want to enjoy quality movement. So this understanding of we have some control over how the body ages when we bring a variety of movement to our day. And in doing so, we can change how the body ages and the functional range of motion that we have in joints and the core strength and stability. But that movement comes from practice. So the biological truth of use it or lose it holds true with this
Yeah.
ritual.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here's my question, because your book is about the 7 wellness. Obviously, there's so many different aspects of each of these 7 rituals and the way they're brought together for each individual, the 21 individuals you talk about. But should we keep the last 3 as secrets? So, because they need, we do you want to share those? I don't know if we should share those. I think we should make them buy the book to get the last 3.
Well,
I feel
listen,
like I don't think that that's a cruel thing for me to say. I feel like you need to get the book if you want to know the last 3 rituals, right?
there you go. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. But as a parting comment, I just would encourage everybody to pick one of the 7 and
Yeah,
start there, right? Like to
exactly.
me, it doesn't. In the research, it doesn't matter where that is, right? So
Yep.
it's just the biological power of stacking these 7 rituals and the difference between locking them into your formula as a ritual, not as a healthy habit that you're trying to fit in, is where the success is. And that was really the magic in working with these individuals. I mean, honestly, I felt like I was getting a master class in life, and just with every
Wow.
conversation leveled up. And I've brought their approach and their magic to these stories.
That's amazing. Well, and so now let's go down because, I feel like a lot of people nowadays, and I maybe before too, I feel like one of the biggest things that people struggle with is fatigue, right?
Hmm.
They're not
Hmm.
getting through the
Hmm.
day with the energy that they should.
Hmm.
I think some of it kind of goes back to the story that you yourself shared just with regards to under eating as the day starts, right?
Yeah.
People aren't getting up and eating right away, and then they're waiting a long time to have lunch or a snack, and it's just not enough to fuel them. And so
Yeah.
share with us some of the energy boosting kind of practices or strategies that you tend to focus on.
Yeah, so out of the gate, first of all, it would be looking at, okay, what's your sleep routine,
Yeah.
right? Let's understand and make sure that you are getting that recharge. And when you're not, I mean, we can see something like there's research that shows us that even with a disruption 5 days in a row of not getting quality or adequate sleep, that your insulin sensitivity changes
Mm,
and blood sugar increases. So to normalize physiology and get us set up for success, to train the nervous system not to be constantly on the lookout for threats, begins with getting sleep cycles set right. And if you're nowhere near 7 to 9 hours a night, then I usually say, okay, let's start by adding 20 to 30 minutes a night and see how quickly we can get closer to that 7 hour barrier. So that's a starting point. And then the next would be what you just mentioned, and that's how and when are you fueling your body? So, what are the choices that you're making in your meals, and what's the duration between meals, as the next way to influence energy? When people are fatigued, they'll lean into the extra cup of coffee or super caffeinated beverages,
yeah.
and that's not a way to go. That is going to disrupt sleep and is going to further compromise metabolic health. So, quick fixes to pull yourself out of that fatigue with stimulants is a really slippery slope. So, diet and looking at when you're eating, what you're eating, sleep, and then of course bringing a little bit of exercise to your day, which is always a bit of a tough sell, because if you're tired and you get home, the last thing you
Right.
necessarily want to do is maybe go out for a walk, but it's incredible how that immediately shifts mood and will dramatically improve energy, as you start to stack that habit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think an important part that people sometimes forget about is that we talk a lot about nutrition and fuel, but that fuel includes good, clean, pure water, right?
Oh, for sure,
Hydration.
absolutely, yeah.
And I feel like sometimes when people get busy, office, wherever they are, doesn't matter. We need to make sure we have something with us that is reminding us to, make sure you're drinking water, because that's a big
Yeah, and
part of
just
that too.
a simple water bottle on your desk. I have
Yeah.
one on my clinical counter, and as I'm moving in and out of treatment rooms, it's there. If it's not there, I'll tend to forget to drink, and
Yeah.
if it's there, I'll be sure that I do. And one of my rituals is I make sure that I've emptied the bottle by the midday, and I have another one before I go home at night, so I
Yeah.
know that I'm getting enough water through the day. So you're absolutely right. Dehydration not only can lead to muscle tension and soreness and headaches, but it also is very, very linked to fatigue.
Yeah,
That's an
absolutely.
easy hack.
Yeah. Yeah. Very easy that I think people overlook sometimes.
Yeah.
And again, having strategic. So mine's a liter. So I have a liter on so I know I have to drink two of these before I go home.
Yeah.
That's
That's
my
good.
goal. So
That's
I'm like,
good.
okay, I'm halfway through this one. I have to
Yeah.
finish it before I go.
And if
But
that gets you up into the washroom more often, then so be it. You're nailing
that's a
ritual
benefit,
four. You're
right? That's
bringing more movement to your day.
exactly. That's a benefit too. So now I got two down.
That's
Uh,
right.
and so what if you have somebody, so we've talked a lot about sleep, and it really is important. And obviously it's
Hmm.
ritual number one, which means I'm assuming it's one of the most important. I mean, I feel like it is, just because if we're not sleeping, obviously that affects everything, our recovery and
Hmm.
the whole deal.
Hmm.
So what happens, or what suggestions do you make when somebody can't sleep? What do they do? Or what do you suggest? What are some strategies or biohacks that you can do if you're having a hard time getting to sleep, even if you're starting to practice some of those rituals?
Yeah, and that's an important question because many people do, right? So as you start stacking these rituals, sleep usually comes around. Now it takes some
Mm,
effort. You've
okay.
got really got to work on that pre-sleep routine. But if you're still struggling, then it's important to have a conversation with your family doctor because there is help available.
Yeah.
One of the strategies that we look at is just how to shut down that inner dialogue. This is where a lot of people have a hard time sort of unplugging. So you mentioned putting your phone away as part of the ritual, and you're not scrolling, you're not reviewing email, you're not going over what has to happen tomorrow. The mentors all practice very deliberate stress resiliency tips. In Wellness Ritual 6, I talk about nurturing mental fitness.
Hmm.
And in doing so, you learn to recognize where are you on your stress response curve? How are you framing stress? So is stress enhancing or is stress debilitating? And just that simple framing and understanding of where you are in your stress response curve has a massive impact on the body's fight or flight response and sort of where you are in your curve. And when we can learn to manipulate our position on the curve, not only can we call in our best performance when we need it, but we also understand when we've pushed past our peak, the importance of prioritizing rest and learning how to back off that curve so that we can be in a position where we can enjoy rest and we can unplug. And if you're hung up on the right side of your stress curve, meaning you're pushed beyond your peak and we're starting to see a decline in performance as stress escalates, sleep can be difficult.
Right. Yeah.
So it's understanding what are the thoughts that are repeating themselves. What are your triggers? What thoughts are you having as it relates to those triggers? How much power are you giving those thoughts? And in understanding that, there can be sometimes some control to develop a strategy around stepping back from those and giving yourself time and space to sleep.
Mm,
Now, there are other conditions that do require medical supervision, right, that we're not talking about today. So
of course.
people with
Yeah.
sleep apnea or
Yeah.
with other
That's,
type of sleep
yeah,
disorders,
different.
their
Yeah.
family doc would jump in, get them
Yeah.
involved with a sleep clinic and help get them the help that they do need. But listen, like insufficient sleep syndrome, which is linked to just not getting enough sleep, it's for real, and the health consequences are linked with cardiovascular and metabolic disease and mental health issues, premature death. I mean, there's just
Oh
like
my
it's
goodness.
it's a very serious situation that needs to be brought into the light, and we need more people talking about the vital importance of sleep and not suffering,
Right.
speaking to their healthcare team about, listen, I want to improve sleep, what can I do?
Yeah.
And so the strategies in the book are really designed to get people with easy things they could do, and that would be approach number one. How can they adjust self-care to have a greater quality of sleep? But if that's not enough, then it would be engaging their healthcare team.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great point. And so I want to ask another question. And so when we're talking about rituals or
Mhm.
um, there has to be some point where they come back around because now we're practicing a lifestyle change for our health, optimal health. And that has to equate to um, slowing the aging process
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
mind, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, what would be kind of one of the number one things that you think would slow the aging process that maybe everybody should be thinking about and bringing into their world as they move forward?
hmm hmm So, what I think is really amazing and cool, and the trend that healthcare is moving is that the current theory around aging is that it's not genetically or biologically predetermined, right? That
Right.
that age is triggered and accelerated by decline in health and biological systems that are largely influenced by lifestyle.
Hmm.
And so if we're able to, as we move forward and the science of aging continues to evolve, if we're able to identify these biological markers and we're able to track and mark them and influence them, like longevity experts are predicting that lifespan and health span are both going to dramatically improve. Like we could be seeing 100, 120 years as being sort of the human norm.
Wow.
And like that's coming. That's the way healthcare is moving. So with my patients and rolling out of the seven wellness rituals, it's like, okay, so let's step back from some of that high-tech advanced science of aging and look at the impact that rituals have. And I like the idea of healthy aging as opposed to anti-aging.
I
I
agree.
think that we have a profound impact. We can have a profound impact on how the body ages, but we've got to stack these decisions to tap into your genetic predisposition. And I'll challenge a patient who has a borderline early osteoarthritic change in a hip or prior sports injury that's come back to nag them. And I was like, you don't have to settle for this poor quality of movement. You have control over it, but you've got to put the effort in, and get your body, moving in a different way. So we can influence how the body ages. I think that the research would say that the most profound tool we have in influencing aging is through diet. The choices again that we're making, reducing the amount of chemically processed, ultra processed foods in our diet has a dramatic impact on the inflammatory state within the body. And it's this chronic state of inflammation that is accelerating these biological markers, that trigger and advance aging.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and nutrition, I always say whole food, if it has one ingredient, you're on the right track,
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how simple it can be. Because I feel like when we talk about whole foods, I mean, there's all kinds of different nutrition diet plans out there, whatever they are. But the fact of the matter is, if you come back to that and keep it simple, it's not overwhelming, right?
Hmm.
An apple's an apple, a banana's a banana. It is what it
Yeah,
is,
that's
right?
right. That's
So
right.
if we kind
Yeah.
of go from that perspective, it just makes things a lot more clear and a lot easier to be able to implement and understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that, it's also like set yourself up for success. Like we all know what our vices are, or where the
Yep.
temptation lies. Like if you remove temptation and you begin to study patterns and cravings and portion size, I mean, there's certain things that we can do to start to trend ourselves towards healthier fueling choices.
Yeah.
And one of those is just like clean out the pantry, get yourself prepared. Like that'd be a great step one.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because if it's not there, you can't eat it.
You got it. You
Unless
got it.
you make a really big effort, which most people are like, nope, that just means if it's not here, I'm not supposed to have it. And that's usually true. Oh, wow.
One of the things
Great.
that I
Sorry,
cut
go ahead.
back was just I just eliminated sugar in my coffee.
Yeah.
And and that's been the way it's, for a little over a year now. And now if I have a coffee and it's given to me with sugar, like it's almost like I just don't like the taste of it. So my taste buds have changed as I've eliminated any added sugar in my diet, and that's one of the components of my ritual.
Yeah.
And so your body adapts is the point I'm trying to make, right? So you make
Yeah.
these simple changes, and before you know it, like it just you don't miss it.
Well, and that's such an interesting fact. And this isn't the first time it's come up it's in a podcast. And so your taste buds do change. So
Yeah,
as your
absolutely.
nutrition changes, you may start to make changes. And, let's say someone who's a little bit ahead of you, or maybe someone who's kind of teaching you how to do this has already made those changes and they're eating something and they think that it's really sweet, right? But you try it and, let's say you've got sugar in your diet, obviously you're consuming sugar. You try it and you're like, that's not sweet at all. Well, that's because you're used to the sugar. When you
Yeah.
start to eliminate that, things that weren't sweet to you before all of a sudden get sweeter, right? Because
And
you don't even notice it.
yeah, 100%. And when we're making these choices, I think what's really important is we're influencing the quality and the biodiversity of our gut microbiome.
Exactly.
And when we're eating a lot of sugar, we'll have cravings for sugar because the unhealthy bacteria and microorganisms in our GI are calling for more sugar. So
Exactly.
when you start to starve them out and you're building a healthy bacterial flora, like the ripple effect in immune function and inflammation suppression and blood glucose and cholesterol regulation and insulin sensitivity. I mean, all these things start to fall in line, and it's because the choices we're making are influenced the gut microbiome.
Hmm.
So we're suddenly not craving sugar because they're not calling for it. And when we do have it, it's sort of like, wow, like that's almost offensive tasting. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's amazing how the body adapts, right?
Yeah.
And so all the stacking of all these rituals, I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about is how can you control your trend line?
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. And so, for those of you who were listening closely, ritual number 6 did come out. I don't know if you
It
missed it or
did.
not, but it did come out. So we're missing. So you've got to grab the book, Take Good Care, right? 7 wellness rituals for health, strength, and hope, because you're missing 5 and 7. And I bet you're going to want to know what those are. And so thank you so much, Dwight, for being with us today, taking the time to share your knowledge and educate our listeners and our viewers. And we're going to have links, obviously, to your website, where they can buy the book, and everything in the description. And so for those of you watching on YouTube, subscribe to my channel. There's a brand new episode every 2 weeks. Give this one a thumbs up. And for those of you listening on your favorite podcast hosts, make sure you give this episode a like, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening to today's show. Head over to Pitel-Killah.com to gain access to some amazing free resources that will help you gain energy, erase debilitating symptoms, and be the best version of you. Remember to give this podcast a like and follow me on social media at Lisa Pitel-Killah. I'm here every 2 weeks with a brand new episode of the Human Optimization Podcast. Until next time.